As a hunter deployed by the guild to the New World, you're tasked with figuring out the secrets of the mysterious Elder Crossing and capturing the massive Zora Magdaros. Monster Hunter is a third-person action game where you fight giant monsters and use parts from defeating them to craft new equipment. It's a gameplay loop most players are going to love or hate, and you'll know almost immediately if you're into it or not. Combat is weighty but satisfying, and there is some great weapon variety. You have 14 weapons, and they all function significantly different from each other. There are 10 melee weapons. The Insect Glaive is kind of a hybrid melee and ranged weapon, and then 3 dedicated ranged weapons. Some monsters are much easier to tackle with certain weapons. You should definitely try and experiment and see not only which weapons you enjoy, but which weapons you enjoy while fighting certain monsters. Overall, the experience is just nicer than previous Monster Hunter games. Monsters have better behaviors, including things like turf wars where monsters will actively fight each other. Monster variety is a bit light though. There are only 30 monsters currently. 12 of them are monsters from previous games, and of those, a few are recolors with slightly altered movesets, but that's just a standard Monster Hunter trope. World is filled with quality of life changes and fun new mechanics that players old and new will appreciate. The grappling hook is extremely satisfying to use, even if your interactions with it are somewhat limited based on the map you're on. The new hunting tools, like the Vitality or Elemental Defense Mantles, will be extremely useful for new players. The Glider Mantle is also insanely fun to use. It's so much fun that it's difficult to bring anything else with you on a hunt. Make sure that you complete the optional quests to get these specialized hunting tools. Instead of being given a bunch of quests at every rank and being forced to randomly figure out which ones are the required quests to rank up, you're given assigned quests which are effectively a story mode. Monster Hunter World has also removed the stipulation of single player and multiplayer quests. Every single quest, even the story ones, can be done with multiple players. If you're struggling mid-quest, you can activate an SOS flare and other hunters can come to your aid. It's a nice feature, but it's reliant on other people wanting to do the quests that you're currently on. Monster Hunter World is beautiful. It's great to finally get a real HD Monster Hunter. The environments are all unique and look great, especially the Coral Highlands, which is the real standout. There is some inconsistency in frame rate and camera work. There were times hunting online that it would chug on a standard PS4. Other times, while solo, I was impressed by how smooth the animations were. The camera has a tendency to freak out, and you'll be able to see through monsters. This is especially bad if you're using a very close melee weapon like the dual blades, as you'll frequently be inside the monster. Monsters will also glitch out and get stuck on map topography, which happens far too often. The music for most areas is fairly generic. Very few monsters get their own dedicated musical piece, instead having a fairly generic area theme, which is a bit disappointing. There is voice acting through the main story. It's sparse and of questionable quality.
You ready to grab this new world by the horns?
The lip syncing is on a level of a poorly dubbed kung fu movie in most scenes.
When will Zora reach the Great Ravine?
Precisely at daybreak.
Good. Let's run through the operation one last time, then.
The actors themselves, especially the handler, are mostly just obnoxious. Monster Hunter has been a series that's mostly had throwaway stories. You're the new hunter, in a new village, and there's some giant monster you need to work your way up to taking out. Monster Hunter World breaks free from that trend. There is significantly more world building, cutscenes, and story focus than previous entries. It's not a great story. It's basic, with fairly generic characters that don't play much of a role. The Huntsman has a few standout moments, but everyone else is kind of just there to be there.
Make your swings count. Cannot take them back.
You may think you're the main character, but your avatar is voiceless. Instead, the stand-in main character is the handler, and I can't stand her. Also, no matter how cool you try and make your hunter look, you will always look like a dork in every single cutscene. The online function's okay, but it is a bit of a mess. Unless you're actively trying to play with friends, which is its own kind of difficult, while in Astera, waiting, you will never get randoms to join your quests. Once you get into a quest and fire an SOS flare, you'll usually have multiple people jump in. Expect a lot of people to run off and do their own thing while using SOS flares instead of doing the main hunt. Also expect a lot of Japanese players. My experience was that about 75% of my online hunts had majority Japanese players. As a result, I had no reason to test voice chat. Loading times on a standard PS4 are borderline unacceptable. To start a quest, you need to wait for the quest to load, and then, once you depart, you have to wait a second time to load in the area. Considering this happens maybe hundreds of times, it's an extreme annoyance. You can reduce the loading times by accepting quests from the handler while in expedition mode while you're already in the area, but you'll frequently be wanting to return to Astera, which is the main hub. The first 2 or 3 hours of Monster Hunter World is an extended tutorial. Then the game continues to hold your hand for the vast majority of low rank and much of high rank. The series has mostly just thrown you into the deep end and left you to figure things out on your own. A forced tutorial section in the early game will be great for any players new to the series, but will be something that's annoying for most veterans. There are also a few monsters in low and high rank that feel like they're gatekeepers and can be more difficult than anything else you've previously encountered. Anjanath and Legania both have the ability to one-hit kill you if you're not adequately prepared with upgraded gear and maximum health from eating at the canteen or from using consumable items. But overall, monsters are much easier to kill, and you take significantly less damage than previous games. There are also tons of environmental hazards to use against monsters and random Vita Wasps and Vita Lilies around that can be used to fully restore your health mid-battle without items. Your experiences with these will vary. If you can manage to find and abuse them, hunts are significantly easier, but you may not even realize the sheer amount of things that you can use. There are a significant amount of quality of life changes. Just basic things like being able to see the weapon upgrade tree in its entirety instead of having to use an external fan-made wiki is just great. You also no longer need to complete a full set of armor to activate armor skills. Negative armor skills are also out. Instead, each individual component has a skill attached to it, and you can more easily pick and choose what skills you actually want. There are still set bonuses to encourage you to wear multiple pieces of the same gear, but they're fairly uncommon until higher ranks and endgame. Monster Hunter World is broken into 2 tiers of difficulty, low rank and high rank. High rank just ups the numbers and makes monsters much more threatening. You'll have to complete both low rank and high rank to finish the main story. Low rank took approximately 15 hours to complete, and then high rank is unlocked. High rank took roughly another 19 hours. If you're new to the series or prefer taking your time, these numbers may be significantly higher. The credits roll at the end of high rank, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. After beating the main story, you gain access to a second tool slot, and by ranking up further, you gain access to tempered versions of monsters. These monsters have increased damage output and are significantly more threatening. Monster Hunter is a game built around replayability. If you enjoyed hunting a certain monster, you can just post a quest again and go hunt it. If you want to build certain armor or weapons, you'll be routinely hunting the same monsters multiple times to get all the materials required. Generally, that means that Monster Hunter has no fluff. You just fight the monsters you want at your own pace. If you want to slow down and build some gear, that's up to you. Monster Hunter World actually has filler in the main story, and it's really annoying. There are numerous story quests that involve either walking around or exploring a new area. Normally, once a new area is unlocked, you get the Harvest Tour quest, and you could just explore it at your own leisure if you wanted to. Here, you're forced into running around and setting up a base camp for every new area that you encounter as you're coddled by the handler. It's grating and it doesn't feel right. After entering high rank, you don't immediately have an assigned quest. You're tasked with doing special investigations. This means milling about until you find enough markings from a particular monster until your research level is high enough. Then a quest becomes available. This is nothing but padding. Now that would be bad enough once, but now proceed to repeat that process 4 more times for the remaining high rank exclusive monsters. You're forced to repeat quests and free hunts until you reach these thresholds. This means fighting monsters you don't want to fight multiple times because you need to progress your research level in specific areas just for the sake of progress. But once the main story is complete, it's back to classic Monster Hunter. Post a quest, stuff your face at the canteen, kill a monster. You can put in over 100 hours in Monster Hunter World with the current single player and multiplayer hunts, as well as all future planned free DLC updates. At recommended playing, games either are ascended to the pantheon of games worthy of your time with a recommendation, or are forced to wallow in the miserable muck of mediocrity with a dismissal. Monster Hunter World is a fantastic start to 2018's gaming lineup. It's more streamlined than previous entries and will be a great starting point for players new to the series. Veterans may be put off by some changes, but will welcome many others. Content-wise, it's a bit light on monsters, but it's the most mechanically interesting Monster Hunter to date. The story mode is terrible. The narrative is an excuse to hunt monsters, which is fine, but it can feel like endless, useless cutscenes rife with terrible voice acting. Your partner, the handler, is especially obnoxious, and she's constantly yammering on and on and on. She's genuinely the worst part of the game. In the main story, there are some extreme lulls in pacing, and being forced to explore for tracks to find the next set of monsters in high rank is just obnoxious. But once that's over and done with, there's an extremely robust game here for both single-player challenges and fun cooperative multiplayer experiences. Monster Hunter World gets recommended playing's most prestigious verdict of recommended.